so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness, which creates and animates all things. Now, of course, understanding this powerful truth is one thing. Applying this incredibly empowering wisdom to everyday life, well, that's another, which is exactly why we provide you with a fresh serving of soul food for thought 5 days a week to help constantly remind you of what matters most. You are it. And I'm your host, Brandon Beecham. I'm the one who will be here with you each and every Wednesday, interviewing a different consciousness changemaker that is also out there working tirelessly to help catalyze change and expand awareness all across Spaceship Earth. On the other 4 weekdays, you can hear me discussing topics such as my favorite thought-provoking quotes, reading and discussing wisdom from empowering books, playing clips from various inspirational spiritual teachers, sharing a bit of mysterious news, taking questions from the audience, and essentially digging into any other mind-expansive topics that will help keep your soul fed by tuning you into positive vibrations on a consistent basis. And you guys have heard me say that if I ever run ads on the show, it will only be with a company that I fully support because I believe their intention is to make a positive difference in the world. Well, I'm pleased to announce that day has arrived and that this episode of the Positive Head Podcast is being brought to you thanks to the support of Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's interview episode, I'm very excited to have Deb Bowen here with me on the show. Deb is a spiritual teacher and psychic who co-hosts the popular podcast Psychic Teachers. Hey there, Deb. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brandon. It is delightful to be with you. I certainly appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate all your patience. We have rescheduled multiple times due to my chaotic schedule as of late. And as I was saying before we turned the microphone on, there's been a few other times where I've had to reschedule multiple times, and they always end up being some of the best episodes. So no pressure, Deb, but we're in that category.
Here we go.
Here we go. Okay, I'm going to start off with the same question I start off asking everyone. You're in an elevator. The lady next to you looks over and says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
I teach. I am a teacher. That is the primary task I was assigned when I came into this lifetime. And because I am a teacher, that then also makes me the consummate student. I am forever learning. So there are two sides of the same coin for me.
And I think that's true of everyone that's a teacher. I always say it on the show. Obviously, I'm putting out a lot of ideas and strong opinions on things, but I love the saying, "We teach best what we most need to learn." And I always say it on the show. It's like, hey guys, I'm doing this for myself first and foremost. There is no selfless act. The fact that you're benefiting from it, awesome, spectacular, stellar. I love it. But I need this stuff most of all, which is why I'm doing it 5 days a week.
I hear that. And that adage of, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Well, it's also true the other way. When the teacher is ready, the student will appear.
I love that. Yeah, that's so true. Well, where do we begin? So much juicy stuff to talk about here. Why don't you start giving us a little background on your story?
Sure, happy to do that. I grew up in a coastal community. I lived in a house on the ocean as a child. My bedroom overlooked the water. So I grew up in what I was bright enough even as a child to know was sheer heaven. And I so much of
Where is that?
Riceville Beach, North Carolina.
Oh, my roots are from North Carolina.
Oh, wow. We'll have to have a conversation about
that. Yeah. You're going to do a little bit of a numerological reading for me. I'll just throw out to the listeners. And North Carolina comes up in my sort of explanation of my uniqueness surrounding my birthday. So.
How about that? If we dig deep enough in North Carolina, we're probably cousins, but,
I just had a woman that I met the other day from the same little town, Wadesboro, North Carolina, is where my roots go back to the 1700s. And she was from the same little town. Her roots go back to the same, it's a tiny town. And her roots go back to the 1700s. Yep, that's right. And her roots go back to the 1700s there as well. We start talking. I bring my uncle up, and she gets this funny look on her face. She goes, I think when I was a teenager, I made out with him in the park or something like that. It's like, how funny. And, we're out here in California, so far away. But anyway, I jumped in on your story. Please proceed.
That's okay, because later we're going to talk about that concept of we are all related in so many ways, so that's a fun
perfect setup.
Fun segue for that. In any case, I grew up in a lovely place and with a deep, abiding respect and love for nature, and that played a tremendous impact on my formative years and still informs a lot of what I believe and what I do. And I had a mom who was psychic, although she wouldn't have called herself that. She just knew things, And she talked to dead people who came to visit during the night, and that was just normal breakfast talk. Mama would say, well, Daddy came to see me last night. And I'd say, Mama, were you dreaming? No, he was really sitting at the end of the bed,
Wow.
And that was just normal conversation. So unlike so many folks who do what I do, I never had that fear of this world. It was just there. It was just an accepted part of my world. I'm teaching right now a class on how to connect with your spirit guide. And I was talking to my students last night about being blessed with having physically seen my spirit guide from the time I was a tiny child. So my primary guide. So, so I grew up in that kind of world and grew up in a Protestant Christian home. That was wonderful. And at the same time, within that context, again, my parents were very amenable to me exploring different belief systems. I came home. I'm old enough that in the 1960s, the Beatles going to India was a big deal in my world.
That's awesome.
So I came home from one day and announced to my father that I was going to be a Buddhist. I didn't know the difference then between Hinduism and Buddhism. But in any case, I came home and said I was going to be a Buddhist. And my dad said, then you just be the best Buddhist you can be. Which was wonderful because,
of course,
it gave me an opportunity to explore and to learn, and without any kind of judgment from that. So that was great. I ended up not following a Buddhist path, but certainly have a great deal of respect for all world beliefs. And then let me rephrase that. In my high school years, there were two divergent paths of study that were fascinating for me. One was the Arthurian legend, and I'll come back and talk about that later. And the other was studying the people of the Lakota tribe. And specifically Lakota people, and I don't know whether most folks who listen to your show know this or not, but there are more than 500 federally recognized First Peoples tribes in this country, each with their own language, custom, and are sovereign nations. And why I chose Lakota, at the time I didn't know. Today I know why. But I did announce to my dad that I was going to go to a reservation in South Dakota and teach school. And he said, no, you're not. So, we said the same thing about Woodstock. So, there we go. But in any case, so I didn't. And I lived for some years with the regret of abiding by my father's wishes and not going to South Dakota. And so I was much older when I was finally able to go to South Dakota and meet some of the people who have become my teachers. And the Lakota concept of connectedness. And I always butcher this sentence. You'll have to pardon my southern pronunciation. But the sentence is matakiasi. And it translates, we are all related. But what that means is that everything is everything.
Right.
That there really is no even me or you, that we are connected at a very deep level. There's no hierarchy.
Right.
We simply are beings who are a part of the same energy source. So the Lakota tradition moved me in that direction. And my love of the Arthurian legend moved me into a study of the Holy Grail, which led me to a study of the Cauldron of Ceridwen. And somehow or another, in a lot of convoluted ways over time, I went back to my roots of really honoring nature and the idea of an earth-based spiritual way of being. And that's kind of my spiritual path in a 2-minute nutshell.
Wow, that's quite the path. Now, when you talk about this connection to nature, so you identify and you talked about sort of exploring different modalities in Buddhism and so forth. And now you would basically consider yourself to be pagan. Is that correct?
That is true. That is right.
Can you explain what that means to people who, have heard that term? And of course, it feels like there's like negative connotation, probably because of our history, right? We think back to, the burning the witch at the stake and things like that. Maybe you can just elaborate on what it means to be pagan.
Yeah, I'll be happy to. By the way, there's still burning witches today in countries around the world, literally, like last week. But yeah, the word pagan actually means country dweller, someone who is connected to the land. That's the meaning of the word pagan. What it came to mean over time was someone who was not a member of one of the 3 patriarchal religions, Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. So, by definition, everybody who's anything else is a pagan.
Gotcha.
So that's a bunch of folks on this planet.
Yeah.
How, you think about it. If you think about indigenous beliefs and Buddhist and Hindu and whatever, I mean, that's a lot of folks who are not Christian, Islamic, or Jewish. So, but what it's come to mean kind of in the vernacular today is that it is somebody who honors the earth, who believes in the Gaia principle, that Mother Earth is a living, breathing being. Right. And that's a scientific principle. That's not a spiritual principle initially.
Right.
And it is also somebody who honors what we call the Wheel of the Year, so that we celebrate those 8 holidays that honor, that are 4 of which are solar holidays, 4 of which are what we call cross-quarter days that honor the time in between the solar holidays. So, for example, our next holiday coming up is Ostara, which is the vernal equinox. So March 21st
when is that?
Is our next holiday.
Gotcha. Right.
So
very
that's
interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of paganism in a nutshell for you.
Now, I always wonder, of course, having psychic gifts, and of course, I'm sure you'd agree with me, we all have this ability. Some of us, as I'll always compare it, some of us, all of us can shoot a basketball and make a shot, but not everyone was born to be Michael Jordan, right? Or Kobe Bryant or whatever. So same with psychic, ability, right? We all have this sort of ability, but some of us, like yourself, have a very strong gift in that way. And then, of course, you've worked that gift, worked that muscle. So I'm curious, it just kind of popped into my head, as someone who has had the path and went down the path that you've went down, and of course feeling this connection to paganism. Do you have recollection of past lives? And if so, of your past lives? And if so, is there, I'm assuming, some pagan background there for you?
Oh, absolutely. I have been able to identify maybe about 50 past lives. that
wow.
that I know of. I've been around a long time. I'm old in a lot of ways, but I can identify a lot of past lives, and some of them the memory came spontaneously, and I think everybody can do this. Some smell, for example, will send you to another place that you've lived before. And sometimes when we have really strong affinities for or aversions to particular places or events in history or time periods, that's usually some kind of a key for us. I have one past life that I can prove that the woman I said I was lived.
Wow.
I can actually prove that person I was able to give. I was actually being regressed by a friend of mine who is a trained regressionist, and I was able to tell her my name, my birth date, my approximate death date, where I was born, where I died.
And you had no recollection in your waking life of this person prior to this regression session?
No, had never heard of her before. No, never heard of her.
Wow, what a trip. What was her? Tell me a little about her. It's just fascinating.
As you asked the question with the idea of the pagan connection to past lives, many of the past lives that I've had were actually related to Christianity. I have been a nun many times.
Wow.
Yeah, many times. And in fact, in this particular session, as my friend was getting ready to put me in a trance state for this session, I said to her, I don't want to go to any of those nun lifetimes. I know about those nun lifetimes. And she laughed and she said,
"Enough nunnery."
That's right. Get me out of this nunnery. And she said, well, we can't control where you're going to go. And darned if the very first place I went in that session was to Chartres Cathedral. And she said that while I was explaining to her where I was, she said I was just wiggling my feet. And she said, what's happening with your feet? And I said, shoes. And she said, what kind of shoes? And I said, nun shoes. And to this day, it's hard to get me to put on a pair of shoes. I'm a barefoot kind of girl. And
so literally nun shoes.
Literally nun shoes, right, exactly.
Dun, dun, dun.
But in that lifetime, I was able to document that the person, that I actually got a name. But most folks don't. And I don't in any of the other lifetimes. I can tell you gender, I can tell you time frames, I can tell you approximate locations, but I have to tell you, while we're talking about past lives, even that story, I mean, who knows where I pulled that from, but here's the past life memory that convinced me that past lives were real. In another regression session once, I saw myself as a Mongolian boy, probably, it felt like maybe 13, 14. And I was standing on the Mongolian steppes with my pony next to me and standing outside of a yurt. And my job was to herd yaks.
Wow.
Now, I know for an absolute fact that if I were making up past lives, thinking, oh, this is cool, I'm going to think I may be I would never in a million years say, I was a Mongolian yak.
You'd have been like Genghis Khan or something, right?
Well, I hope not. But certainly I would not have ever envisioned that. And that experience helped me to understand that there's something to this idea of that we go through many lives in an attempt to learn lessons that we need to learn from lifetime to lifetime.
Wow. Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. So, yeah, for myself, it's like I've attempted to I've went through regressions a few times before, but I've never had an experience where, and this makes me think of a question I had from a listener recently saying, hey, I've tried to connect with my spirit guides. I've tried to do this. I've tried to do that. I've never been successful. And, same with me. I've tried multiple times to regress or connect with a spirit guide. And I don't ever feel like I've had any sort of profound experience. So curious, since that's part of what you teach, and we're going to get into some of the things that you teach, and you just mentioned connecting with your spirit guides, is there any particular advice that you would give someone who really wants to have these types of experiences, but, has not been able to as of yet?
Yes, I have advice, and yes, your listeners are going to hate it. Because everybody does when I say what I'm getting ready to say. And that
Fair
is
enough.
meditate.
Yep. Yeah.
And a couple of things about that. We live in such a fast-paced, connected society that slowing our brains down enough to just be rather than do is so hard in today's world.
Yeah.
And I know that. I get it. It is for me, and I am a very consistent meditator. But there are many ways to meditate. A lot of times when I teach meditation, folks are really afraid that we're going to have to sit in a lotus position and chant Om for an hour. And that's not happening. I can't do that. I don't want to do that. That doesn't work for me. So I teach a program where I teach people to start meditating for 1 minute. You can do anything for a minute, really.
Yeah, that's great.
And so we work on building up to longer and longer sessions. You also don't have to sit still to meditate. You can walk, you can drum, you can chant, you can do all sorts of things. But the intent in what you're asking about that connection is to leave yourself open enough and calm and quiet enough so that the information has a way to get in.
Right.
Our guides can't talk to us if we're talking.
And that makes a lot of sense for me because it's hard. My mind literally goes a million miles an hour all the time. And so I can see how people who are sort of wired the way I am would have a little more difficulty than someone who's a little more calm, cool, and collected.
And that's why something like walking meditation might be very helpful to you. And I mean, literally just walking around your neighborhood, walking in a park. And sometimes when you do that, pick one thing to focus on. I don't know, let's say, for example, you're going to walk in your neighborhood and you're going to pay attention to your neighbor's front doors.
Right.
And so that's your front door walk.
That's a good idea.
And what that begins to do is it begins to train your mind to be focused on one thing and to really get rid of extraneous stuff that's flying around in your head. Right. Another thing I recommend to folks if they live where there's one available is to walk a labyrinth. One of the things that I do whenever I travel is if there is a labyrinth available, I always start my experience in a new place walking a labyrinth.
Great idea.
It's a very wonderful thing to do.
Good advice. So, yes. Good advice. All right. Well, now seems like a good moment to take a quick minute to tell those of you who aren't familiar a bit about our sponsor, Gaia. I've been a big fan of Gaia for many years now, which is why they're the only content provider I've ever reached out to in regards to potentially supporting the Positive Head podcast. So needless to say, I'm very excited they're now supporting the show. Gaia truly is my personal go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web. They have an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. Just to give you an example, on May 1st on the show Wisdom Teachings, host David Wilcock explores the scientific proof of ascension, DNA activation, and how interplanetary climate change is made possible with nested spheres of energy emanating from the galaxy. I mean, it'd be pretty hard to be more up my alley, right? As you guys all constantly hear me say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to go deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place I know of to do it, period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. So let's talk a little bit about, as a spiritual teacher, which of course, this is sort of a broad term that you hear a lot, especially these days. You have all kinds of programs and teachers and so forth. I'd love to hear what your specialty is when it comes to teaching and what it is, the message that you most want to get across, because I know you have a lot of knowledge and wisdom in all kinds of areas. What is your primary focus with your teaching these days?
The notion of connectedness. And back to that basic Lakota concept of matakiasi. And what I found over years of study was a melding, a coming together of spirituality and science. Now, you have to understand that you were talking to a gal who, the closest I ever came to a science experiment was blowing up some vinegar and baking soda one time in high school. But what happened was that notion of that everything is everything, that everything is simply energy.
Right.
And understanding that from a spiritual point of view led me to a study, and forever I will continue to be learning, a study of quantum physics. Mm-hmm. And because quantum physics says the same thing. I mean, we know the theory of Schrodinger's cat, for example.
Right.
So the two coming together has been a real fascinating study for me of the idea that there doesn't have to be division and separation in the world, even between science and spirituality, that there really is common ground. And I so believe that if we can find common ground beyond dualistic thinking, then we really can bring about an elevated level of consciousness and world peace. That's absolutely for world peace.
Yeah, I love merging the two. I always say we're at a point in our evolution, right, in this time, in this current time frame where science and spirituality are really doing a dance like they haven't before. It's like, and I love bringing in, okay, here's these sort of what some people would consider woo-woo concepts. Okay, let's tie it into what quantum physics is saying. Oh, well, there you go. It's a perfect match. And that seems to be happening more and more frequently. And of course, for different types of people, it's very necessary. People who need that sort of scientific perspective and so forth. And I agree with you fully. Just the merging of the two is a very fascinating thing to behold that's happening in our society.
I agree. And if we can just think in terms of vibration.
Right.
Because that's what energy does. It vibrates.
As Nikola Tesla said, if you want to understand the universe thinks in terms of frequency and vibration or something like that. That might not be an exact quote, but pretty much what he said, right?
Yeah, I can't quote it either, but I know exactly what you mean. And so when I think about that, I think about that when, for example, we're in a room with people and I bet everybody listening to this has done this. You're in a room, you're at a party or whatever, and there's somebody in the room that you really feel drawn to. You'd like to talk to that person and just kind of have a general conversation. Well, what is that about? Where does that come from? It comes from a matching of vibrations. Right. You know? The same is true when we are repelled by somebody else. You know, there's a we're not vibrating at the same rate. So if we can begin to find that common place where we can vibrate together, we can communicate better. You know, we can really come together at a level of understanding that I don't believe the world has ever seen before. That opens the door for communication and connection on so many levels. So, I'm sorry, ask your question.
Yeah. Well, I always find it fascinating to kind of consider the notion. You have 7 billion plus people, I believe, at this point, and counting on the planet, 7 billion souls. And of course, bumping up against anyone, you and I connecting on the show, it's so unlikely when you look at the statistical probability, right? So would you say from, your intuitive perspective that when you do connect with someone, there's typically some level of soul history there, their soul family on some level, most of the time or all of the time, or what are your thoughts on that sort of concept?
Absolutely. I don't believe in accidents. And it's that synchronicity that I think is so much a part of this way of being. I think that folks come into our energy field for a reason, and we come into theirs for a reason. Right. So there's no accident. I mean, there's no accident that you and I are having this time together today. I don't know. Neither one of us probably know where it's going, but we know it's going somewhere. And,
right.
And so that's true with everyone. And even, and I'll come back and answer your question about soul groups, but even if, for example, I don't know, it's the cashier in the grocery line, Right. And you may not ever know that person's name, but at some level, you have an impact on that person in the way that you treat them and relate to them, and they on you. And so there's even that kind of exchange of energy is important to be noted. When you talk about soul groups, my understanding from what I have been taught is that when we individuate from that creative force, whatever you want to call that creative force, so many eons ago, and we want to have, and we individuate from that force because we want to have a human experience. We want to understand what it is like to have physicality. And so in that process, we set out for ourselves many, many lessons over many, many lifetimes. And we travel through those lifetimes with people who agree to play in our movie, basically. And we agree to play in theirs over many lifetimes. And that's what a soul group is. And we do those different roles in each other's movies over time to be teachers for each other. Right.
To give each other the experience that we want to have. And oftentimes, I had, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him or not, Dr. Eben Alexander on the show a while ago. And if are you familiar with who he is?
Yeah, go ahead. Tell us about him.
Yeah. So, one of his interesting, points that he made was, when he was on the other side. And for those of you who don't know or haven't heard me talk about him before or have heard that podcast, he is a Harvard neurosurgeon who contracted meningitis. It destroyed his brain. He went into a coma for a week. His brain was destroyed. The neocortex, the part that would create hallucinations and so forth, completely destroyed. The doctor said, sorry, pull the plug, family, he's not going to make it. They pull the plug. He miraculously comes back. He has a story of, his experiences on the other side, why he was in the coma. And one of the things that he talked about is how we do reincarnate. He learned that we reincarnate in these soul groups or soul families. And oftentimes the person that plays the biggest, the villain in your story or what have you, are those you're closest to on the other side. And so, I found that really fascinating. And it really kind of leads into, we talked a little bit, you were going to kind enough to give a little sample numerological reading. And of course, you use my birthday to do that. And so maybe it's a good time to do that. And I can just share a little bit of that story, to give, and for those of you, I've talked about this before too, but for those of you who haven't heard, and Deb, I don't know that you've heard, I was born on my dad's birthday, which was July 28th, and he was 28. Well, so on his 28th birthday, I was born, but it was also his grandmother's birthday. Her birthday, July 28th, from North Carolina, right? Her mother died on that day. So then you take, speaking of villains in your story, one of my best friends and business partners, and I had this whole betrayal that happened a year and a half ago or so with him. His grandmother's birthday was July 28th as well. His baby's mama was July 28th as well. My ex partner, who led to not only a relationship with her, but my next relationship. I met her on July 28th, and she had a boyfriend whose name was Anson, and Anson, North Carolina is a little county where Wadesboro is, we talked about earlier, where all my relatives have this birthday. Well, Anson, her boyfriend, committed suicide on July 28th. So, prior to me knowing her, of course. So that's the weirdness surrounding my birthday. So, and I kind of parlayed into that because I started thinking about, the villain character, this person who is a really close friend, who there's a betrayal and, has, of course, a grandmother with my birthday, and his child's mother has my birthday. So I think that's a interesting little synchronicity there. And it gives you perspective on the fact that, he's playing a role in my story that, that I wanted to experience. So for me, it's hard for me to, certainly I want nothing to do with this person in this life, but I also have a higher sort of view of it that, okay, he's playing that role of the villain, the betrayer, or what have you, and giving my soul the experience that I want to have, right?
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a trip, huh?
I know.
Let me add to one little thing, and then maybe you can elaborate on the birthday stuff since you're going to talk about it. But the one other little thing I left out. So Anson, her boyfriend, committed suicide on July 28th. The last place he took her was Disneyland, right? Right before it happened. Well, my brother had a girlfriend who had my mother's birthday of July 24th. And the last place he took her before she committed suicide was Disneyland. So yeah, it gets a little weird there. There's some darkness, right? But that's the story, and so yeah, pretty wild, huh?
Wow, it really is. I will have to tell you this. I want some time to meditate on this, and maybe I'll write you an email and give you some detailed thoughts after what I get in meditation on that, if you'd like for me to do that. Oh,
I would absolutely love that, because it's obviously something that I'm very intrigued by, right?
I would be too.
Yeah.
I just did the numerology of just 728, and interestingly, that numerologically comes out to a number 8, which is about abundance and financial success, which is an odd thing. So I don't think that that's a numerological issue that's happening with you with that date. I think it's another issue. But what I've done for your birthday is I've just done a basic what we call a life path or a destiny number for you for your birthday. If I were doing an in-depth reading for you, we would also do the numerology of your name. I would look at the number of vowels and consonants and missing letters in your name. There would be a whole lot of other additional information that I would provide in an in-depth numerology reading for you. But to just do your birthday, and if folks want to try this at home, here's how you do it. You add the month, the number of the month, the day, and the year. And remember to do the full year. So if, for example, you were born in 1981, don't just do 81. You got to do the 19. Okay, right. So keep that in mind. So for you, Brandon, and I said this to you before we went on air, is that, no, of course you don't have just an easy number, because your birthday comes to an 11. That's your number. Now, in numerology, we stop at 9 because numbers then begin to repeat, except for certain numbers that we call master numbers. And 11 is a master number. It represents a higher plane of consciousness, of knowledge, and achievement. However, it is also a number of martyrdom. Interesting. So it is a number that, and we could continue to reduce it. We could take it down to 2, and this is where it becomes important for you as the person who's getting the reading to make this decision. So, if, for example, I took that 1 and added the 1 to it, so 11 becomes 1 plus 1 becomes 2. 2 people are folks who are finding balance. There's an energy of connectedness and balance between male and female energy. There is a desire for harmony and togetherness, of finding common ground in duality, which I think is really interesting as we have been talking about this.
Right.
But if you don't reduce it, and if the 11 feels more in keeping with where you think you are in your soul's journey, then there's a huge responsibility that comes with having 11 as a life path number. And that is that with that expanded consciousness and knowledge and awareness that for example, you might think of somebody like Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Mother Teresa and those kind of folks as being in that realm.
Gotcha.
If you are one of those people who has that same capability in this lifetime, then your responsibility with it is to use it in a way that is helpful to the world around you. And you're certainly doing that with this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun. It's interesting that you mentioned that, the martyrdom piece, because I was telling someone the other day, I was raised very, very conservative Christian. My father, to this day, door knocks on Saturdays to invite people to his very conservative Christian church. It's called the Church of Christ. It's very, very conservative. You probably are familiar with it in the South. It's more prevalent there than maybe out here on the West Coast. But and so for me, as I sort of had my own awakening beyond what I was taught growing up, this sort of hell and brimstone kind of approach to love and God and what have you, I sort of, I guess for a long period of time, I had a very kind of a negative attitude towards, the character Jesus. I'm like, why are people so hung up on this character? Like, there's no conduit to your source and da-da-da. And just in recent years, I've started to really feel like a resonance with this character. Like the idea of, and what he taught, of course, I believe is the same things we're talking about and that I'm teaching on this show and talking about. And I feel such a strong connection in the last few years to that character and, Christ consciousness and that sort of thing. And, I was talking to someone about that and they were like, I definitely see that in who you are and what you're doing. And, but you need to be careful as you identify strongly with that character. There's the martyrdom piece to it. So that's interesting. I had looked up my life path number before in 11 and sort of being the master number and so forth. And so I knew a little bit about it, but I'd never heard that. So instantly when you say that, I think of that conversation that I recently had. I can't even remember who I had the conversation with, but that's an interesting thing to, I guess, be aware of and be careful of, right?
Well, absolutely. Certainly it is. And certainly in the big picture, as you were speaking of that analogy of the martyrdom of Jesus, but also just that self-sacrificing that we have of ourselves day to day, and it's just our day to day relationships.
Right.
And are you really willing to let pieces of yourself go? Right.
I instantly think of the gamer tag that I took a long time ago that my son still uses when he plays Xbox, and it's smarter. It's smarter with an S on the front of it.
Oh my gosh.
Too smart to be a martyr. There you go.
How funny. So I hope that's helpful to you.
That's very helpful, very intriguing, and I would absolutely love it if you would be so kind as to spend a few minutes in meditation to see if there's any more insight you get into, the situation. I would definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. That's just wild, when those kinds of things happen, and there's something. I mean, is that a significant date in your soul group? Obviously it is. And why is that? So I will see what my guides say about that for you.
Interesting. Yeah, I would absolutely love to hear about that. So let's talk a little bit about your podcast, Psychic Teachers. You've been doing that for quite some time. You have a co-host. Maybe tell the listeners a little bit about what they can expect if they start tuning in.
Oh, great. Thank you. Psychic Teachers Podcast celebrates 7 years on air this month.
Oh, wow.
7 years. Probably more than 350 podcasts in the past 7 years, one a week. We're at 3.2 million-ish downloads. And
Wow.
I can't even tell you how many topics we have talked about. My co-host is I can't even tell you. My co-host is the lovely Samantha Fay, who is just light itself. She really is lovely. Samantha and I are very different in some ways. As we know, I'm a pagan. Samantha is a devout Catholic.
Oh, really? Wow. Interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And truly, truly, truly psychic. She is also a medium. I am not a medium. Samantha is.
Okay.
So I only talk to dead people sometimes when they choose to talk to me. Samantha is able to communicate with them on a regular basis, and I am not.
That's not something you normally hear surrounding, like, Catholicism, right? Psychic phenomenon being viewed as okay and not the devil.
Okay. It's not okay. Or the church doesn't think
she's
it's okay.
She's the rebel Catholic then. Got it.
She is a rebel Catholic. She actually is. But one of the things that we model on our podcast is a very deep and abiding respect for each other and each other's beliefs. And
Wonderful.
We model what we talk about that non-dualistic thinking and that coming together. She is much more fascinated by and interested in, I don't know, what am I, like... she loves talking about black-eyed children and cattle mutilations, and I was trying to say, Samantha, that's gross, and I don't want to talk about that.
Let's not focus on that. Right.
No, people think she's the nice, soft, gentle, kind one, and she is, but I'm the one who really is all light and rainbows and butterflies,
Right.
That stuff. But in any case, what our podcast does, our listeners tell us, is that it does tell them that they're okay. It validates the fact that for many people, what they have suppressed or been afraid of for many years is okay. They're not going to die and go to hell because of their psychic ability. It's okay to have that. It's okay to explore. And so they really appreciate that from us, I think.
Sure.
It also gives them community. They feel like they're not alone. They're not freaks sometimes.
Right.
I think a lot of our listeners are folks who live in isolated areas where they don't have a sense of community, and our podcast gives them that.
Right.
So it's Psychic Teachers Podcast, and we're on Blog Talk Radio on Sunday nights at 9 Eastern, but we're on iTunes and available for download for free. It doesn't cost a thing. So everybody's certainly free to download it from iTunes as much as you'd like.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be people that hear you for the first time and will be tuning in. So, thank you for sharing a little bit of that. And that's such an accomplishment. 7 years, I'm coming up on I'm a little under 2 years, and 7 years is quite the run.
Well, it is. And, when we started this, I have to tell you, we started as a call-in show. And that was a fiasco. It just was, it was not working well for us at all. And we started getting emails from folks saying, please stop taking calls and just teach. We want to learn from you, rather than us talking to somebody who wanted to talk about a specific question about their individual situation. So that's what we did. After just a couple of months, really, we stopped taking calls and just became a teaching show. And that has served us well, and seems to really serve the folks who listen to us well. From our podcast, of course, folks then are able to connect to our individual websites. Mine is debbowen.com. Samantha's is samanthafay.com, and Fay is spelled Fey. And can see, the teachings that we do and the services that we offer. And it's been from us, one of the gifts of the podcast is that community of knowing that there are people whose lives have been changed because they have found the freedom to be who they are.
Yeah. Yeah, isn't that it's the most rewarding thing imaginable. For me, it's been such a humbling and amazing experience to get that feedback from someone that you had that effect on their life, and you sort of helped to give them a perspective that, what I find fascinating, just to touch back on what we talked about earlier, the whole soul family concept, it's like everyone has a certain frequency and vibration, and if someone is attracted to psychic teachers, it's a perfect fit for them, right? And it can sort of open them up in a way that is perfectly suited for them. Or with this show, you have people who it's like this particular brand, my particular brand of wackiness, maybe is just really resonated and has helped to sort of remind people maybe of what their souls have forgotten, because of course, I'm sure you'd agree, there's nothing that we can teach that someone doesn't already know. It's just a matter of remembering what is sort of buried down deep in the amnesiac experience of life in 3D, right?
Absolutely. Just the word remember means to member again.
Yeah.
To bring something back into membership.
Right.
And make it a part of the whole again.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love all these so much with our language. There's the sort of this double hidden meaning in the words that we're using. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Absolutely. And, an odd thing has been happening to me over the past year is that I started getting, and I never thought of myself as someone who was channeling any information. My meditation was always just information that was coming to me.
Right.
And from my guides or from whomever. But over the past year, I started getting connection in my meditation from some entity who presented as Mary Magdalene.
Oh, wow.
And, and the first time it happened, I called my friend Joel, who is a periodic guest on our show and who is one of my oldest friends and who is a crystal expert, who has actually studied with Melody, who is the big guru. But anyway, I called Joel and I said, I'm going crazy. I have lost my mind. What the hell has happened to me? and he said, I don't know, Deb. I've gone through a lot of stuff with you over the years, but this is brand new. And so he suggested a particular stone that I should use as a connection piece in my discussion with this being that was talking to me. So the next time it happened, I stopped this voice and I said, whoa. First of all, how do I know you really are who you say you are? And second, why are you talking to me? I'm a little pagan woman. What are you doing?
Right.
I'm not a Christian. Why are you talking to me?
I'm not worshiping your son, so leave me alone.
I like him. I have a lot of respect for him, but, he's not my main guy. And,
right.
And she said, I'm not a Christian either. And she said,
I would imagine she would say that.
Right, she did. And she said...
He wasn't a Christian, right? He just is a teacher who taught love.
Yeah, Buddha wasn't a Buddhist either,
Right.
But anyway, right. So she said, and I have come to you that way because of your frame of reference for the concept of the Grail. She said, I really represent an energy source that is more than this. And so I said, well, okay, I'll listen for a while. And so I did, and I wrote down after every session with her and continue to write them because she continues to talk. But the message that I'm getting from whoever this is or whatever this is, which is really freaky to me, is that this notion of non-dualistic thinking, this concept of coming together of spirit and science, and this idea that we really have to, in this day and age, find a way to truly, deeply care for each other, that we really are our brother's keepers, our sister's keepers, and that doesn't just mean two-legged people. Because in the Lakota way, people are just people, and ants are people, and everybody, and, orangutans.
Right. Everything's a soul.
That's right. And so that's information that has been a shift for me. It took me a year, almost to the day, to be willing to speak to anybody about this other than just a few close friends, because I'm afraid your listeners are going to think I'm crazy.
Well, funny enough, I just had Garnet Schulhauser on the show a few weeks ago, and he has a fascinating story of he encountered his spirit guide and ended up going on all these journeys with him in the astral, realm. And part of what he talked about in our interview was his experience meeting Mary Magdalene. So this is the second time in like a month I've talked to someone who is communicating with Mary Magdalene. So pretty interesting.
Well, I have to tell you, she said to me, that's because that's the easiest way to conceptualize her. She said, you're not the only game in town. You're not the only person I'm talking to.
Sure.
So, of course, thank goodness for Google. And lo and behold, that's true. There are lots of people around the world who are being presented with the same information in some form or another, in a framework that works for them, from this energy that presents as Mary Magdalene. I am not the only person. Some of it seemed very odd to me as I listened to other folks, and their world was different from mine, but this was just different. I'm not judging. It was just not my realm of reality. Yep. Others, the information was similar to what I was getting. So I'm beginning to at least feel not so isolated in this. And like now I'm talking to you and information that you've just recently had. So it's a prevalent movement, I think, that's happening around the world today.
Yeah. And it seems like the veil is sort of thinning for people. So more and more people are having these types of experiences as well. Would you agree? Absolutely,
I would. Yes. Yeah. Yes. And I think there's a huge need for it. I think that we need for it. I think we are reaching critical mass with what we're doing to the planet, with our false sense of connectivity to a piece of plastic that's really not a human being at all, like we're doing right now. Right. I find that happening.
Yeah. I think that seems to be a consensus with everyone that I talk to, who's doing some, of course, some level of work in this realm. Almost, I haven't had anyone yet who doesn't feel like there's some level of a mass awakening or spiritual revolution of sorts happening.
Yeah, I do too. I certainly do too. I think it's happening on many levels, both on intensely personal levels and also on a very global and energetic level as well. Right.
So you'd mentioned crystals, and it made me think of something that I find really interesting. And you talked about using a crystal to help with communication. One of the things about crystals that and I have basic knowledge and so forth, and certainly appreciate them, but I'm by no means an expert. But one of the things that I've found a really interesting concept, and I'm just curious because you brought it up, your thoughts on it. I'm sure you've heard of Lemurian crystals before, right?
I have. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, have you heard this concept? Okay. So have you heard this concept now with Lemurians? What I was told, and you tell me if you agree with this, and this has been your experience because you are an intuitive and so forth. What I've been told is that with Lemurians, if you ever look at a Lemurian crystal, it's got these lines on it, like that almost look burnt into it. And what someone told me that I just thought was a fascinating concept, not sure if it's true or not, but certainly open to the idea that this is actually, with a Lemurian, that is encoded information from the Lemurian, the ancient Lemurian civilization, that for someone who is in the right receptive state, can kind of go into a meditative state and access the information encoded on that crystal. Have you ever heard this?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Okay. What are your thoughts on it?
That is the basic concept behind the work that a Lemurian crystal does.
Right.
Exactly what you have described. And Lemurian, and I own a Lemurian crystal. It has those etches on it. Have I been able to access that information? I have not. But I keep hoping that one day, that information will come. But there are other stones and other ways of also accessing information. There are crystals that have what we call doors in them, and it's literally it's almost like it looked like it was etched with a laser, where there's a hole basically in the stone that's a doorway into other information. It comes. Are you familiar with the Akashic records?
Yes.
Okay, so it's the idea that there's this. I think of it as this gigantic library in the sky, where all the knowledge.
Google for the universe.
Exactly. All the knowledge that ever was, is, or will be is stored there, and that we can access information from the Akashic records through those doorways in certain crystals. So, yes, I believe that. Crystals are the oldest beings on the planet. We used to think that the oldest crystal we had was a stone called Numite, which is from Greenland, I believe, Greenland or Iceland. And recently there's been a discovery of a stone that apparently is even older. So why wouldn't something that ancient, if you remember this, that they're alive? Right.
That's what Tesla talked about with crystals. He said something to the effect of, crystals are living entities. Whether or not we understand the nature of their reality, they're living nonetheless, right? You've probably heard something to that effect.
Yeah, I agree with Tesla, and so they are. And remember that if everything is energy, so are crystals. They're just a part of that energy flow.
Right.
The rate at which they vibrate seems very slow to us because their energy is so dense.
Right.
So why wouldn't they have been storehouses of knowledge, and they too have been assigned tasks to accomplish on the planet the same as all the rest of us?
Right. Yeah, I have a pretty interesting story. There's a stone. Have you ever heard of Yaming Zhu?
No, I'm not. What is that?
It's a very rare stone that actually glows. And supposedly, only, in China, it was very, very rare, only found in China, I believe, and only emperors and so forth had Yaming Zhu. Well, there was a guy who, in China, I guess, started making these synthetically, the same way we can make a diamond in a lab. And I met someone a few years ago at a transformational festival, and he had some of them. And I had, if I recall, it's been a while now, I think in my very second podcast, I shared the story. Maybe someone can go back and listen and tell me if I'm right or wrong. I can't remember, but I had such a wild experience with coming across these Yaming Zhu stones, and then sort of a story that ensued the evening that I actually had come across one. And certainly people can have adventures, and I have a friend who I think about who talked about his Moldavite, which of course came on. Moldavite was from an asteroid, right, that hit our planet billions of years ago or what have you. And he had an experience where he even dreamed about this Moldavite stone and telling him, where to go and find it. And he went and found a garage sale, and there it was, and bought it. So really fascinating when you start thinking of having adventures with these, with these entities.
Well, it is. Sometimes rocks come to us because we need them. I've had situations in my house where suddenly there was a stone sitting on my kitchen table, and I have no idea where it came from.
Wow.
When I researched it, I realized, I probably needed this rock,
Right.
And my friends joke all the time. They say, give Deb a flat surface and she will build a crystal grid or an altar. And that is, it's true. They're everywhere, all over my house. But, and the stone, interestingly, that my friend Joel suggested I use as my communication tool with this Mary Magdalene being is a stone called chiastolite. And when he said that to me, I said, I don't think I have a piece of that. And he said, yeah, you do.
Yeah.
And he was explaining to me where that stone was in my house and who gave it to me. And I had forgotten about this rock. I had forgotten I even had this rock. And so I went and researched what this stone does in Melody's book. And lo and behold, it certainly turned out to be the right rock for that communication. So, do you need a whole lot of stones? Yeah, it's fun. I mean, gosh, it's fun to have a lot of them and do a lot of things with them. But really, a piece of plain old clear quartz will do just about everything that you ask it to do. Yeah,
right.
So you don't really have to
sort
have
of like the stone with the most diversity, right?
It is. It absolutely is. It certainly is. But yes, I do think that for me, working with my crystals, and I have been for many years, is a nice connection tool for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question for you, and this is one that I always go to. We love stories on this show. I love stories. And so I always ask for a story of synchronicity or serendipity or a positive paranormal story. And something tells me you'll have something up your sleeve for me.
Well, I will. I also serve as the resident psychic on my local paranormal investigation team.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it is. It's fun. And all that stuff that you see on TV with psychics hollering and all that green light and stuff, for goodness sake, that is not the way it should be. In my humble opinion and in my team's opinion, ghosts are people too. We should be nice and kind and respectful, Right. And so we got a call some time back to see if we could communicate with what felt to the people in this house as an elderly woman who was very confused. And she would do very confusing things, like rearrange the dishes in the kitchen cabinet and the things on the countertop and just things that just were weird. So we did some investigation on the house and learned when it was built and learned who the original residents of the home were. And learned that all of them had died. All the people who had originally lived in the house were dead. This wasn't a terribly old house. It was probably built in the 40s or 50s. And so we go in, and of course, the rest of my team has K2 meters and recorders and video cameras and all the stuff that right. All the high-tech stuff that ghost hunters love. And then they have me. And I go in with a piece of tourmalated quartz because the quartz amplifies and acts as a conductor, so I'm receptive. But the tourmaline through which the stone is shot, the tourmaline protects me. So I have a piece of tourmalated quartz in my left pocket, and I have an old-fashioned Boy Scout compass. Because, that's right. Those are my tools. Because what will happen is if there is a real sudden shift in energy, or if there is some kind of an entity in a room, that compass will spin. Wow. So those are my tools. And so we go into this house, and I don't say a word. That's the other thing that makes, I think, the work that we do somewhat different, is that all that psychic talk and stuff of, oh, shoot the camera over here, and oh, I feel this and that and the other. No. Because then that skews the evidence.
Right.
So my job is to be quiet. So I am. And so we go through the house, and everybody sets up all their equipment and stuff. And then the team starts asking questions. How are you today? Just kind of very nice, gentle questions. And at one point, one of our investigators says, do you know what year it is? Do you know it is, I can't remember what year we did this, but let's say it was 2012. Do you know it's 2012? And at that point, all of the equipment went haywire. The camera shut off. The recorder shut off. There was a K2 meter that wasn't even turned on that was in one of our bags that we weren't using, and it lit up all over the place. I mean, it was just bizarre. And what we realized was that information was very disconcerting to the ghost we were talking to.
Wow.
What we figured out was that this was a woman who was waiting for her family to come home.
Oh.
And she had not realized her family was never coming home because they too were on the other side, and somehow or another, because she was trapped here, she wasn't over there with them and not realizing that they were all dead.
Wow.
So they continued to ask those questions, and finally, and this is also a part of what we always do, is offer, and it's my job to offer her an opportunity to go into the light, to go on.
Right.
And so I did that. I did that for her, and it took a while. And by that I mean maybe 30 minutes or so of just talking. The equipment was still off. And when she left, it was as if the air in the room shimmered and all of the equipment came back on.
Wow.
And we knew that she had gone on to her family.
What a trip.
Wasn't that it was just lovely to be able to be helpful to her in that way.
Yeah. Was it just a matter of sort of, for you who was guiding her, was it just a matter of getting her to understand what had transpired and, sort of the true nature of the situation in which she found herself?
Yes. Yeah. We talked a lot about things that used to be that she was familiar with. You could sort of feel that she was with us, and then to be able to explain to her what had happened. And once I think she got that, once she understood that she was in the wrong place, and if she was going to talk to her family, she needed to go on. Then she needed
to go where they were. Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Exactly.
What a fascinating and helpful thing that you did.
It seemed to have been for her, and I'm very happy about that one. That one turned out really nice.
Yeah, I had an experience with someone who was on the show actually a while back, who is a medium, and we had a private session with my brother, and I mentioned his ex that had committed suicide, and I was kind of part of that experience of her communicating with her and helping her to transition as well. And that was a very powerful experience to be a part of.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that is such a gift, because there's such a sadness connected to folks who are, for whatever reason, have chosen to be trapped in that in-between world, Right.
And in her case, having been a suicide, she was still in that same state of despair, and here it was just sort of like ongoing for her, just a wild, and it's such a wild thing to really think about, and for a lot of people, I think you consider, okay, when you die, it's all this information opens up and you are instantly know all, see all, and it appears that that's not the case. You sort of can transition and be very much in a state, or even worse than you find yourself in physical reality, which I guess gives you the idea, symbology for the idea of hell, although ultimately temporary. I think you'd agree.
Yeah, I do agree, and I agree that folks put themselves there because they don't realize they have choices of ways to go in a different way. One of my favorite books, and we recommend this book on the podcast all the time, is entitled "Testimony of Light" by a woman named Helen Greaves. Greaves, Greaves, Helen Greaves, and she is channeling information from a friend of hers who is a nun. They were also, in addition to her friend being a nun, the two of them were members of a spiritualist church, which are folks who channel information from the other side. And they had agreed that whoever died first would talk to the other, kind of thing. So Sister Frances is talking to Helen, and she's explaining exactly what you have just described about being assigned the task of visiting a man who was an artist, and he had asked for paints and canvas on the other side, and he painted nothing but blacks and grays. And always in the painting, there was a doorway. And because he had no white paint, he just left a sliver of the canvas visible to indicate that the door might not be completely closed.
Wow.
And Francis saw that was his way of hoping that perhaps there was a way out of this place he had chosen to be. And so when she was able to talk to him about that, he was able to paint the door open and go on to a better place on the other side. I just love that story.
Wow, that's beautiful. It sort of reminds me a little bit of the Robin Williams movie, What Dreams What Dreams May Come, I believe. I don't know if you've seen that one, but it made me think of that. I think it's such a beautiful movie.
It is.
And such a sort of foreboding, too, of what, he's helping his wife who committed suicide in the film. And then, of course, as we know, he ended up taking his own life, and just it makes it that much more haunting and beautiful, I feel.
Absolutely, it does. And suicide is such a hard topic for so many of us because it is so painful, and yet there is also the idea that is the karma and the path that we've chosen, and the lesson that we've chosen to learn in this lifetime. Yeah.
Well, this has been absolutely fascinating, Deb. I feel like I could talk to you for another hour or two, but I know you have things to get to, as do I, and as do the listeners. But this has been so wonderful to connect. Well worth the wait. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to share some of your wisdom. And what I would like to ask is, of course, the listeners I know are as intrigued by you as I am, and will want to follow your work. And obviously, the Psychic Teachers Podcast. Is there another way that you would recommend them connecting with you?
Sure, absolutely. And Brandon, let me say this before I tell them that, how grateful I am to you for your time and your having invited me to be on your show. We're just delighted and honored to have you with us, to be a part of your show. Would you come and be on our show?
I would absolutely love that.
Great. Then Samantha and I will arrange our schedules and get back to you and try to work out connecting with you as well. That would be lovely. And again, thank you so much. Psychic Teachers Podcast is available on Blog Talk Radio and also from downloadable from iTunes. And then my website is debbowen2bs.com. Okay. So you can always check in with me there. And from there, you can get to email and a lot of other ways of finding out a lot of work that I'm up to.
Excellent. I do have one last question for you. I like to leave off with open with the same question and end with the same question.
Sure.
In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Deb Bowen?
Oh, what a great question. The meaning of life is to be present in every single moment. Every moment is a gift. There is always beauty. There is always hope. There is always joy. Our job is to find it and believe it and trust it and live it.
How beautiful. Well said. Thank you so much, Deb. I look forward to coming and connecting again on your show. And until then, journey well.
Thank you, Brandon. You too. Take care.
Well, everyone, that concludes this week's interview episode. If you have enjoyed this positive download from our hearts and minds to yours, please take a minute, give us a rating or review on iTunes. Since iTunes is the holy grail of all things podcasting, your good reviews help us to reach more listeners. Also, we would be extremely appreciative if you would tell your friends and family about the show. Our sincere intent with the Positive Head podcast is to spread positivity to the world, because Well, because we're selfish, quite honestly. I say that jokingly, but really only halfway joking. I'm referring to the good kind of selfish based on the knowing that we all get what we give in this life, because when we give, we're actually always giving to extensions of self, since we're all really one in the same consciousness, just in different bodies. So if you want to be a good selfish along with us by helping to spread the positivity, by all means, please proceed to shout about the Positive Head podcast from your rooftop. Otherwise, as you continue on your fabulous journey in this 3D reality, be sure to remember this. As long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Journey well, everyone, and thank you for being.